This is Tobin, and 2 months ago he was only throwing 82 miles an hour. But now he throws 90 miles an hour and developed himself into a college prospect and recently committed. So today my co-founder and I are going to break down exactly what he did to gain those 8 miles an hour within those 2 months. And we're going to break down the one big mechanical change that we made with Tobin that was responsible for most of his velocity gain. And we're going to break this down in a way that if you have the same issue, you can start implementing it into your own pitching delivery as well. So Tobin came to us topping out at 85, but it was more around 81, 82, right? But he made a crazy transformation and he hit 90 miles an hour like 2 days ago. We're just going to break down exactly how Albertus was able to do that with him because, I mean, how long was it?
2.5 months.
And he even sent us a message about this saying that he was pretty much only throwing 82 miles an hour. And then now he hit 90 miles an hour. I just want to get into it. Like, what were the biggest things that you worked on with Tobin?
So Tobin had no idea how to properly fire his lower half. He was a guy who really wanted to overextend his back leg and get really dumpy with everything. And so what was happening was his back leg was going early, his pelvis was going early, he was pushing out of his back leg instead of rotating, and so he wasn't able to transfer energy up the chain, and this was causing a little bit earlier torso, along with him having a naturally later arm action was making the arm action even more late. But the first things that we needed to do was clean up the arm a little bit and entirely repattern the lower half to be rotational because he's just not a linear guy, and teach him how to transfer that rotational energy up the chain. And during this, we had to make sure that he wasn't over-rotating as well. We had to teach him how to decelerate through the proper windows as well. So it became fix the lower half, learn how to decelerate your energy properly, and clean up the torso/arm timing, which might seem like a lot, but paired with the right training environment and constraints, you can get quite a bit done in the allotted time frames that we're given. But specifically, the active focus was the lower half.
Yeah, and with Tobin, the majority of the results came from these mechanical fixes, right? Why was that the case? And why was he able to make such a huge jump? What kind of athlete was Tobin to be able to do such a thing?
Yeah, Tobin was a great athlete and already really strong for his age. So we didn't need to put him through all of these extensive weight room phases and build him into a better body. The really good engine already existed. And so for an athlete like this, it's all about maximizing their velo in comparison to where the engine is. And so you really want to catch the velocity up to the engine before you start focusing on training the engine again. And then boom, engine increases, boom, then we go back to the mechanical deficiencies and fix them as well. So the entire time it was like, hey, let's catch up your velo, get you to a 90 mile per hour guy, and then we'll go ahead and put you back in the weight room, advance everything, and then get you better athletically, strength-wise, explosive-wise. But he was so far behind, you know. When I look at a guy like that putting up those numbers who's moving super athletic, it's like, hey, this guy should already be in the lower 90s. So before we just torch him in the weight room and have him focus on stuff that's already good, we need to raise the floor of everything else.
Yeah, so something I want you to quickly touch on, and you don't have to go super in depth with this, is, you know, with the World Series done and everything, and everyone's talking about Yamamoto and how he isn't strong, right? I know you touched on how he was so strong and that was an advantage, and that allowed him to make such a huge jump. Like, why is that an advantage, and why do people actually need to train their engine to throw hard?
A vast majority of human beings are what I call normal, you know. So we have this whole boat of human beings and they're normal, and they have to work as hard as they possibly can at everything, right? They have to figure out, okay, I need some more force production, I need some strength, some sprint speed. They have to fill all of the buckets. When you look at a normal person like this who has the opportunity to be a top-tier athlete, who wasn't just born a top-tier athlete, you have to look at what is he bad at, and what do we need to raise that we can already raise. And so everybody looks at Yamamoto and his specific ways and everything that he does, But the vast majority of human beings will never be able to achieve that, even if they mastered every single part of everything that exists. You know, you weren't born the same as this freak of nature. And so, you know, everybody has their opportunity to be their own big leaguer and the person who creates their path. And so trying to copy all of these other people's path is very unfruitful because you are you. You know, Shohei did not get to be Shohei from doing the same thing as Yamamoto, okay? You know, Shohei lifts a lot of weight. He does a lot of things. And so if we're looking at the best in the world, they all have their own method, but they follow their method to get to the end result that they've achieved. But Shohei's not trying to copy people. Yamamoto's not trying to copy people. They figured out their own body and they maximize their own body. And so everybody trying to copy Yamamoto is great because they're going to figure out some stuff along the way, but it's not perfect, you know. And in this game, which is a game of efficiency and limited repetitions, you want to be as close to perfect as you possibly can. You know, perfect practice makes perfect. Normal practice will make you normal. And in a game of relativity, perfect practice equates to exactly what you need and not what they need. And so doing these things to figure out some stuff that you might incorporate is good because you kind of got to test the waters with everything a little bit. But players need to realize that their path is their path. And if you're trying to follow somebody else's path to achieve what you need to achieve, you're realistically just downgrading the results that you could get because you're not willing to bet on yourself being potentially better than them one day using your own methods.
Let's go a little bit deeper into the exact things that you worked on with Tobin in terms of the mechanics. So let's just start with what was like the biggest or the most significant thing that you improved to increase velocity.
So the big thing to start him out was we had to teach him how to hold tension in his back leg and rotate it rather than push out of it. So all of the first cues were focused around, hey, here's how you're going to hold your back leg, and here's how you're going to start to feel the rotation paired with the drills that I gave him. And that would then set the pelvis up to be in a better position and then set the spine up as well. Because the back leg is one of the first things that goes in the entire body, right? It's really the ankle and foot, but the back leg as a whole goes first. And so, hold on, let me think how to talk. That was really it, bro. Like,
that's how you gained 8 miles.
Tobin was just like, hey, man, we got to fix your back leg, fix your pelvis. We got to teach you how to rotate it, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next thing. But that did a vast majority of the work because his compensations were coming from that original impact of his energy from the bad positions. And so the second that we set that poetry in motion, everything else started to clean up a lot. At first, there was quite a bit of variability. You know, some days he'd do it 30% better, some days he'd do it 80% better, some days it would almost be perfect, and then some days he wouldn't do it at all. And so it was like, hey, clearly your body wants to go back to normal, so we need to stay focused on this until it's consistent. And the more consistent that got, the more everything started to naturally clean up. Because the other drills in his training economy were addressing the spine issues, the weight distribution issues, and the arm path at the same time. So he didn't really have to think about those. And the original impulse that we fixed paired with that just, you know, made everything way easier. But that was really it, dude.
Yeah.
We didn't even need to do a whole lot. Most of it was me just being like, Tobin, bro, same thing. You know, like, and those are the easy ones, dude. Those are the fun ones because it's like, hey, bro, you've got like 14 miles per hour left from this one adjustment. So we're just going to lock in. You know, we're just going to lock in and only do the same thing until we've mastered it. And I don't have to switch their weight room phases all the time. I don't have to put them through all these different cues. They show up, they feel it because they're really good athletes and have really good connections. They just throw like crap. And then we just move on and just keep attacking the same thing over and over again. Versus some of these athletes, they can't feel it at all. And so we go through 15 cues before they finally get the feel, you know. when you have a really good athlete who can already feel the area, you're going to have a lot quicker success than a guy who has no proprioception to the area you're trying to fix. So yeah, he was just a really good athlete, dude.
When you say rotational, right? We need to get him more rotational. What does that actually mean? A little bit more in depth.
Yeah, so if you think of pushing off the rubber, right, we're creating linear momentum towards the catcher, right? But when we think of rotating, we're rotating through these specific windows and planes that help us direct all of our energy through the catcher with our arm. And so some of these players who maybe have genetic defects in their ankles or knees, or even maybe sometimes in the structure of their hips and pelvis, they might have to create a lot of linear energy by pushing off of their back leg to help rotate certain parts of the pelvis in the throw. Rotate, right? And for some players who don't have these genetic defects, they're not a linear thrower, they don't use their spine in extremely weird ways, you have to get them to rotate through the pelvis and front leg and decelerate it through a specific window, rather than they'll push off their energy, it will get stuck, and then they can't rotate over their front leg whatsoever because they weren't generating enough momentum for them to sustainably rotate their pelvis through the second part of pelvic rotation, which is into the front femur. So linear momentum can be good for some guys. There are people who throw 100 miles per hour being linear, but a vast majority of human beings who throw 100 miles per hour are extremely rotational. There are linear aspects paired with rotational aspects that help you combine the planes and throw 100 miles per hour, but for most people, their lower half is extremely rotational when it comes to the firing of the hips, pelvis, back leg, lead leg block, etc. So even if you think of like the lead leg block, the pelvis and the lead leg block are rotating a little bit as the block is happening. So even the block and deceleration itself is rotational. And so linear energy might work for some. I used to have a super linear lower half and I threw really hard with it. I threw mid-90s with it. But as things changed in my life and my body got older, I couldn't necessarily do that anymore. So I had to become a lot more rotational because I couldn't compensate as well anymore, even with a really good lead leg block. So
would you say that the linear momentum kind of comes from you just like pretty much the gravity, and then the back leg is more rotation instead of creating linear momentum?
I'd definitely say that a lot of linear energy comes from the drift, but dude, it's so dependent on like certain guys who are super extension throwers, their linear momentum is sometimes going to come from a push. And like I'd say a vast majority of the energy that you want linearly does come from your drift. You can have like a super rotational upper half and a super linear lower half and find a way to patch those two things together and throw 100 miles per hour, and then vice versa. Like you can have a super linear upper half and rotational lower half.
That's the last thing I wanted to touch on was when you try to get guys to be super rotational, right? More rotational than they are. How do you stop them from being over rotational? Because that can also cause issues, right? And so how do you think about that?
Most of the time, these people who are over-rotating just don't understand that you have to throw through this target, and we're not trying to throw around this target. And when you go and look at their plyos or their baseball throws, you'll realize that this impulse is just coming from really bad quality drill work. So you look at their pivot picks and they're spinning off. You'll look at their other plyo balls and they're spinning off. A lot of the time it comes from early energy that's forcing them to continue to rotate to generate enough momentum to get their arm through the zone. But it's really just a bad impulse a vast majority of the time, And once you fix their focuses during throwing of like, hey, don't spin through the target, like stay facing the wall. Or sometimes you'll look at these guys and they're the guys who are throwing the plyos like right here. So they're releasing the ball here and they're just spitting through the target. But a lot of these impulses come from really bad quality drill work and building the wrong impulses. It's typically not a strength or weight room issue. It's always like, hey, if we dig deep enough into this guy's routines, And this is why our first week is free and we give them so much time to go through everything. Because if we dig through their routines, we'll almost always find the exact causation of why these bad mechanics exist somewhere in their practice realm. So it's not that they didn't ever do it. It's just that at some point they stopped doing it properly and started doing bad drill work, and that's why we run into these issues now. Because if you give little kids and young men a ball and you have them throw it naturally, they're not going to rotate through the target. They're not going to spin through the target. That's something that's really important too, is like, and you might think that all of these drills are really helping you, but you could be doing 5% of the drill wrong and it could be messing up 30-40% of your training and throwing economy. So that's something really important to think about that players just don't ever think about. But yeah, a majority of the problems come from bad training environments and not from the body not being able to do it.
So firstly, what specific things did you do with Tobin to actually help him get more rotational? Was it like drills, and like what type of cues? And also if someone's watching this who's like, you know, way too pushy and trying to fix it a little bit, like how would you recommend to go about that?
So the first thing that I had Tobin feel was he wanted to lose the angle that he created tension with in his back half. And so what was happening is when he'd go to throw, he'd push out of it, right? And so the focus and the cue became, hey, we're going to create tension and we're going to try to keep that back leg as stiff as possible, almost like you're trying to hold the degree and angle that you start your load with. And then we're going to try and fire it without losing that tension in that back knee and keeping it. So it was like he was trying to feel this instead of this. And also one thing you notice about when I do this, you can see immediately my torso wants to go forward early as well. So that was one of the reasons why he struggled with his torso being in a good spot, was because that push of energy was forcing it to go early. So it became, hey, we're going to stay as loose as possible here, keep the tension in the back knee, and rotate with the same angle. And we did that across a lot of lower intent drills. And if you go back and look at some of the pictures in the Slack as well, you can see that when he first came to us, he was here at foot strike and everything was dumping forward. And when everything started to improve, it was here. So now he's in a totally different position. He's finally rotating and everything got a lot better. And for people trying to fix that, you can try the same cue, but the thing is it could be from different issues. You know, it could be from your hip not firing properly, which is why you're forced to push out. It could be from your knee extending. It can even be from your back foot not getting off the ground in time for rotation, and so that forces you to push out to create energy, right? So if you're trying to fix this, you need to examine where in my lower half chain does the energy break down, and is it creating that push, or is something else forcing that push to happen, right? Because some players, their lead leg can also pull everything open early, and so this forces them to push as well. Or they don't understand that they need to rotate their back leg into their pelvis and pelvis in the front leg. The front leg will swing everything open, and then this will just be dead, and boom, once again. So there's tons of different issues that are created and cause the push. And sometimes it's just the fact that somebody told you to push off the mound your whole life. But if you're working on this, like I said, identify where the energy breaks down. Give yourself some drills that force you to stay back over your lower half, anything that throws momentum backwards, and then focus on not losing the tension here early. And then that should be a good place to start.
Okay, if you're still here and you feel like you're struggling with gaining pitching velocity and you know it's what is going to get you to the next level, then I want to invite you to book a call down below. In this call, we'll analyze your situation, analyze your mechanics, and see if we can help you and how we might be able to help you, just like we did with Tobin. If we do find it's a good fit, you'll personally work with coaches who have developed and worked with multiple MLB players, including my co-founder, Albertus. They will personally take you on, they will program everything that you will need to gain pitching velocity, and they'll also coach you the whole way so that you know that you're making progress at all times. And so if you feel like that's something you need in your baseball career right now, book a call down below and we'll see if we can help you.